The European Union is relying on a desperate last dash from the UK in crunch Brexit talks to secure a lucrative trade deal as negotiations enter a critical period, an official close to the negotiations has claimed. The latest round of talks resume in Brussels this week, with both sides remaining confident a free trade agreement, FTA, can be struck over the coming weeks. Both sides have repeatedly lashed out at each other over the lack of progress made, warning time is running out to get a deal over the line in time for it to be ratified by the European Parliament by the end of the Brexit transition period on December 31. UK and EU negotiators are refusing to give ground on several red lines, including fishing access, the level playing field, state aid and the role of the European Court of Justice, ECJ. Earlier today, the EU warned while it will continue to negotiate in a constructive manner with the UK, a trade deal needs to be agreed by October at the very latest. An EU official closely involved in talks ahead of this week's latest round told Politico, the UK desperately needs this deal. If the clock is ticking, reality will start to sink in London. The UK might not always have behaved rationally in its negotiations with Brussels, but surely the pandemic and the lack of trade alternatives must lead to some reason in London. Britain has experienced a series of setbacks in trade negotiations with other countries, which it had hoped would increase the pressure on the EU to compromise on some of its crucial red lines. The UK and Japan could not announce a trade deal as planned at the beginning of this month, while New Zealand Gas indicated British negotiators are unprepared for trade talks. Negotiations with the US will continue during the country's presidential election season, but it is unlikely Washington will push through a deal before the vote in November. David Hennig, the UK director of the European Centre for International Political Economy, said, "The UK government's ambitions for new trade agreements this year always looked unachievable, but this doesn't mean they will change their approach to EU talks and prioritise a deal. The EU doesn't have a great record in understanding motivations in London. The politics of Brexit having always been more important than the economics.